We often see the highlight reels of filmmakers, especially now in the age of Instagram, and you're not actually seeing the reality behind that. I didn't realize how hard it was going to be, and there's multiple times where I felt like I was going to give up. I had the storyline that if I wasn't successful, I wasn't lovable, and I was like in my room editing and felt like a complete failure. And so for me, I wanted to share that idea that it's okay to fail and that it's part of the process. And there will be times where you doubt yourself, and there'll be times where you're like, this is impossible. But if you believe in it enough and you have a strong enough why, then you'll see it through no matter what.
So you got up for a sunrise.
Yeah.
Reasonably good weather.
Beautiful morning.
To see if we can try and get some wildlife, hopefully, and maybe a bit of Marchment scenery.
Exactly.
Sebastian Solberg is an award-winning documentary director based in the UK. He's made documentary films, TV series, and commercials for brands such as Canon, Red Bull, Google, and Visa. His film credits include One Breath, A Life Without Gravity, and the BAFTA-nominated documentary, The Eagle Huntress. Sebastian runs his own production company, Sunrock Films, and is the creator of the Documentary Film Academy, an online community and educational platform designed to empower the next generation of filmmakers. Thank you so much for being on the show. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me here, and I'm excited to be here.
Oh, it's a real treat and pleasure on my end. So to get us started, why don't you share a little bit more about what you're currently doing with the Documentary Film Academy? That sounds awesome.
Yeah, so I run a academy called the Documentary Film Academy, which is a community of documentary filmmakers, and our mission is to help both those aspiring to be documentary filmmakers and those who are currently documentary filmmakers to go out and make their films. And we support them with education, whether that's like through courses or one-to-one coaching. We also have like a community group where we all help each other out. So often like on the WhatsApp group, we'll be messaging each other and sharing like behind the scenes from different projects. And we also will ask questions. So it might be like a specific camera that someone's looking at getting, or it might also be a storytelling challenge. And then also we'll give each other feedback. So we'll be working on like documentary treatments, and then we'll share them with each other and give feedback on that. It's very much about creating a support system and a community and a group. I'm so much more likely to make things happen if I have that community, whereas if it's just me, I'm like, oh, wait till next week. Whereas if I've got that group of people to be like, how's it going? What have you been up to? I'll be like, yes, I'm there. And that for me has been in almost like a superpower where I can tap into that accountability, and it's an absolute game changer. It's basically the community I wish I had when I started out.
Wow, that's amazing. And that's also the thing, right? Whenever you're creating anything, if you're creating something that you wish that you had at some point in your career, that's how you provide that value for other people and make things a little bit easier for the next wave of people trying to do what you did, you know? So to give listeners a little bit of context and background. So I first got in touch with you because I was in a bit of a funky period of my own where I was just feeling a little bit lost. And I think I can attribute that to being very worried about the future in the life of filmmaking and in my career as a freelance video editor. You never know when your next paycheck is coming in. You don't know when your next job is coming. And then even when you create your own stuff, there's no way to know if it's gonna land with people, if it's gonna work. So failure, for me at least, is something that's always kind of looming, and it gets in the way of me enjoying the day-to-day and enjoying the present moment. And so I typed in one day, I was feeling the feels, and I just typed in something around the lines of failure as a filmmaker, you know, just to see what comes up. And I came across your blog post, and I'm gonna link it in the description because I found it to be such an honest and relatable article. And it just made me realize that I'm not alone. Failure is something that we all kind of encounter as filmmakers. And you've had some great tips and tools and advice on how to not fear it and how you've been able to move forward with it. So I kind of just want to share that wisdom and that knowledge for any filmmaker or any aspiring filmmaker out there that might be worried about failure and might let it create a little bit of anxiety in their lives. So thank you, first of all, for writing that blog. And what inspired you to write the blog in the first place?
I'm so glad that it resonated with you, because it's something that I feel isn't talked about enough in filmmaking. We often see the highlight reels of filmmakers, especially now in the age of Instagram and TikTok, where often you're seeing the glamorous side and you're not actually seeing the reality behind that, and then maybe the 10, 20 years to get to that stage. And I think more than ever now, there is so much fear about being a filmmaker with like technology, with AI and all that kind of stuff, replacing our jobs and all the fear of that. And added to the mix of like the industry is completely changing now in so many industries. And I hear so many people who are really, really struggling. And I know people who've been like top producers on like BBC shows, like high-end television shows, and they're now struggling to find work. And if you're not able to adapt all the time, it is a really, really challenging industry to navigate. And again, when I was starting out, I was enthusiastic and passionate and naive, but I didn't realize how hard it was going to be. And there's multiple times where I felt like I was going to give up. And again, like you, I wish someone had kind of said, this is like going to be really tough and really challenging, but actually failure is part of the process of succeeding. And to be able to thrive in this industry, if you aren't innovating, you're not able to, like, you won't survive, because you'll get left behind. And I believe that the best way to innovate is through trying new things and failing. And so for me, I wanted to share that idea that it's okay to fail and that it's part of the process. And actually, I would encourage anyone to fail, because if you're not failing, most likely you're not putting yourself out there enough. And so I wrote this article kind of sharing some of those stories. And it's also with people that I work with, the people that I see that are succeeding the most and making the most amazing films and pioneering new ideas are the ones that are failing again and again and again and again and again. And it takes a lot to be willing to have all those failures, because it's not comfortable failing. It's really uncomfortable. And when you're doing a job where you're financially, as a filmmaker, where you kind of have financial insecurity of ups and downs and the roller coasters, it's really hard. And I'm happy to talk through some of kind of those periods today and share a bit about the ups and downs, because I want anyone who's kind of getting into this industry to know that it isn't a smooth sailing, but it is an amazing career. And like there is so much I wish I could have told my younger self, and I think that is a huge part of the Documentary Film Academy, is like I want to teach people to help them not make the same mistakes and instead go out there and be able to succeed and avoid those painful moments.
Okay, can we do it again, guys? I'm gonna have another shot up here. Good, carry on.
You write in your blog that you first started making films at the age around 9 years old, during a period, and feel free to share as much or as little as you like about this, but during a period where you were being bullied. So what was it about filmmaking that kind of drew you to it as like a means of an escape?
Yeah, so I started, as you said, making films when I was about 9 or 10 years old. My stepdad at the time had bought like a little handy cam and was wanting to use that to film us growing up. But I remember the first time I picked it up, I was like, it was like love at first sight. I was just like, this is so exciting. I can capture images and I can film things. And I was obsessed with the visuals. I'd get my friends together and would go out and capture these amazing moments. It wasn't until a few years later that after making films for a little bit, that I was at school and getting bullied for just being different. And that was quite a challenging period. It was heartbreaking, but for me, filmmaking was very much an escape. It was a place that I could travel to these other worlds, and I could be anyone I wanted to be, and I could come across as cool, because I also struggled a lot at school to make friends and connect with people there. But one way I could do that was by saying, hey, do you want to be in my film? And they'll be like, yeah, that'd be awesome. And they'll respond in really cool ways. And so over time, it actually became like my armor. And so if I always had a camera in my hand, and I had really supportive parents. And I'm so grateful for that, because they could have easily stomped it out. And they saw that I was really focused on it and loved it.
And you had a really powerful line in your blog where you said, pretty much all of my self-worth came from filmmaking. Would you mind talking a little bit more about like what that mindset felt like and how it led to you handling failure at that young age?
I think I very much put filmmaking as my everything. And so when filmmaking was going well, then life was amazing. But then when filmmaking wasn't going well, and maybe I'd entered a film into a festival, or I'd had a day of filming and the footage was deleted, or whatever happened, it hit me really hard, because I had nothing outside of that kind of balanced me. And it wasn't a lot later in life that I realized that actually it's really important to have other aspects of life that you get self-worth from. Because if you're just relying on one thing, it's like having a chair with one leg. If you take that chair out, you're going to crumble and fall to the ground. And it was really important to learn the lesson of having that balance, but it didn't come until a lot later in life. Probably a lot later than I wish to admit.
Well, it's also, I think that's just a normal thing and like a common feeling. I mean, I certainly deal with that constantly. Whenever a project that I do doesn't pan out the way, quote unquote, I had hoped or had envisioned, it's just a real shot and a real blow. And it's just hard to then pull yourself back out of that funk. And the way that manifests for me is if I'm working on a project and during the project, I feel like it's not going the way I wanted it to go. Like if I catch it, a bad habit that I have is then being like, okay, you know what? I'm just going to stop. I'm going to abandon this and I'm going to move on, find something else. This is clearly not the project. It's not working out. Let me do something else. Have you had that experience of in the middle of a project realizing it's not working how you intended and abandoning it? What was the first time that happened, and how did you overcome that ultimately?
Yeah, all the time. And sometimes I think especially in the early days that I abandoned projects a lot more because I didn't see the value then of finishing them. Whereas now I'm like, every project, no matter how terrible it is, there's value in finishing it. I can't remember on the top of my head of one of the first ones, but the one that was most, I guess, significant that I abandoned for a long time was a film called One Breath. And I left that for 2 years on a hard drive because I went out and filmed that documentary and I was so excited by it. And I'd found this couple on Instagram and they were free divers and they'd set this world record and they were doing amazing diving feats. And I flew out to where they were at the time and put all my savings into this project. And I arrived there and we had like I think a day of filming, maybe half a day of filming. And basically the following day they said, I'm really sorry, but we're gonna have to cancel the rest of the week filming because we've just had something come up and we're no longer able to do this film. And I was like, I've put all my savings, like I'm not able to work over this time because I'm filming here. And I was just like absolutely broken. And I was like, oh. And at the airport when they kind of dropped me back at the airport, they also said, oh, by the way, I have this hard drive of footage. It's just some archive footage from our last couple of years. And I kind of just put that in my backpack and didn't really think about it. And I was like, oh, this could have been such an amazing documentary and I'm a failure and I'm just no good at filmmaking. Like a few months later, I looked at the footage and I was like, oh, this is just like random footage. How am I going to make this work? And it wasn't until 2 years later that I was like, I really, really should do something with that film. And going back to what I said at the start of the importance of working with people and asking for help and accountability. And I got an editor to basically have a look at the footage and help me go through it. And we worked together over a couple of months and eventually kind of found a story that worked and a through line. Got a sound designer to help do the sound design and a colorist and a composer to make the music. And we had a finished film, and that film got shown in over 100 cities around the world and won lots of awards and shown in different festivals, and it was amazing. And it could have just been left there on a hard drive and never been seen or finished. And so anyone who's making a documentary, I always say, like, no matter what, even if you do like a shorter version of the film, always finish the documentary, because you never know what might come from that project. I mean, people are even now sending me emails, and it was like, I don't know, that film was maybe 9 years ago that I started filming that, and I'm still getting emails now about people saying they were really inspired by it, and that blows my mind, because that film almost didn't get made.
Yeah. And I mean, that's an extremely ambitious subject, an ambitious project to like jump in on essentially by yourself. And so I love how you say, you just messaged them on Instagram. Before you messaged them, what was it that made you feel like I can do this? Because that to me would be terrorizing, even just sending the Instagram message, right?
So that was because of the Eagle Huntress. So the Eagle Huntress was a documentary that I was a part of, and I was part of the crew and filmed a section of that documentary, and it was the most incredible experience. And there's an interesting story about failure with that, if I can mention it after I've answered your question. But basically, having worked on that film, and the director Otto Ball, he'd basically seen this article about Ashil Pan, who was this, I think she was 13 at the time, and her dad was teaching her to be an eagle hunter. And he saw these images on the BBC news website, and that same day he contacted the photographer and said, let's make a documentary about this, because it was this incredible image of her at a mountain holding an eagle, which ended up being the poster for the film. And kind of that tenacity that he showed in getting this film made was like, I can do this. And I loved his idea of taking like an amazing image and then finding the story behind that, because photographers take all these amazing images and they have the contacts and the resources. And I was like, okay, if I can find like a really nice image that I can use to market the film, which is what he did with the Eagle Huntress, and there's like a good story there, then there's no reason I can't do that. And that's, I started looking on Instagram, I looked at different articles, looking all over the place, and then I came across their imagery and I was like, their imagery is amazing. And through that, I then contacted them, and they said yes, which was great.
And that's just such a great takeaway there. If somebody is in the state of mind of not sure if they can do something, not sure if they can accomplish something, what could be a good way in would be seeing if there's a way that they can work on somebody else's project, that they're not, they're not the one spearheading the whole thing, but they're contributing to it. And then they can see how that person got started, how that person is navigating it. And it just gives you a tangible example of like, oh, this is a human being doing it. Why can't I be a human being doing it as well,
I think that's such an important thing to think about, is you don't need to reinvent the wheel. And I think for such a long time, I was trying to reinvent the wheel. And as I started working on more and more projects and more films of other people's, I kind of learned that process. And I didn't go to film school, but I started out by filming behind the scenes on other people's films. And I did that on lots of feature films. And then I did that for about 5 or 6 years. And that became kind of like my film school, where I learned everything. And a question that often people ask is like, that's great, but how do you get that first kind of opportunity and first break? And I think it might be worth sharing a little bit about from the Eagle Huntress, because that is like a prime example. So I'd been working on a documentary project, and I met like a cinematographer through that, who is an amazing cinematographer. That was the cinematographer of the Eagle Huntress. And he wasn't able to do a section of the filming, and neither was the director, because they were both busy, but they needed to capture kind of some key moments in Mongolia, and then also in Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan, which is the 3 places I ended up filming. They said, are you available these dates? Unfortunately, I wasn't. I had committed to working on another project, and I was like, I'm so gutted, because I knew this film was going to like blow up, but not as much as it did. But I knew it was going to do really well, and I was like, I've got to be a part of this. But unfortunately, that first kind of round of filming that they needed me, I couldn't do it, so I said no. And it was heartbreaking. Like, I tried to change the filming things, and I was like, I can't say no to this other project. And like, that's, the principle of just dropping out wouldn't have been good. And so I continued to email the director because I was determined I was going to get on this film and go to Mongolia. Over a space of a year, I sent him regular emails and just like saying, I'm still here. But I think the really important thing to remember with when you're being persistent in that way isn't about trying to get something from that person. It's trying to add value. Because I have often people emailing me who might consistently email me every week, but they're saying, can you give me a job? Can you do this for me? Can you do this? And it's just like, that when you're busy and you've got lots going on, you're juggling things, that's not the way in. And so I knew he was looking for funding. And so I kind of looked up some websites and things and looked for grants. And so I sent him grants. And then I also said, I'm also available just at the end. But I kept adding value. I kept updating him. And then I would call him because I managed to get his number as well, and then also just say, hey, how you doing? And I remember there was this one point where I think it was maybe the third time I'd called him, and he answered, and he was really angry. I was like, oh my gosh. And I'd said to myself, like, this is the last time I'm going to call, and if he doesn't pick up this time, and he was like, but like, I then realized later that he wasn't angry. He was just under a lot of pressure, and he'd also just broken his leg, and so he was in pain. But I interpreted it as him being really angry and frustrated, and I was like, oh my gosh, I've gone too far. I've pushed too far. And this was after a year of emailing him and calling him regularly. And I was like, okay, I accept. I've literally done everything I can to get on this job. And then interestingly, like 2 weeks later, he sends me an email saying, do you want to come to Mongolia? We need some more footage filmed. We're not able to make it. And he said, I really admire your tenacity. And if you're like this determined and you're continuing to add value constantly, then I am willing to send you out there and give you a chance.
Wow.
And it was a big chance that he took on me, because at that time I wasn't super experienced like the DP who's doing most of the filming. And then it was myself and a sound man. I had a sound person I worked with regularly, and the two of us went out. And it was the most incredible experience. But going back to failure, like, I failed again and again, and I sent emails, and I literally remember that time when I called him. I was like, this is going to be my last go at it. And then, and I think that's the thing, is if you want to get on a job or a project, work out what's the biggest problem in that person's life. And if you can solve that problem, you're going to have a much higher chance of getting in.
I don't think a lot of people realize that, because when you think about emailing, kind of looking for work, essentially, I think the most common thing, the impulse, is just like, hey, here's my stuff. If you need anyone, let me know. But that idea of finding a pain point and then finding a way to solve that problem just differentiates you from the pack of people emailing just looking for something. So I think that's a wonderful piece of advice. And also it just gives you a little bit more, I would imagine, just gives you a little bit more sense of control, because even though you're not in control of what the outcome is, you know that you've done your best at differentiating yourself and increasing your chances of a response, But even doing all the right things, you still might not hear back for a year. So. Even
this podcast is a great example of that. Like, this is through this, we're building a connection and an opportunity, and like, you never know, like, things could come from this. And I think if you're out there putting yourself out there and connecting with people, like, it's just going to increase the chances of getting work. And it's not just sitting there and saying, why have I got no work? It's thinking of proactive ways, and whether that's adding value to someone or it's getting someone on a podcast or whatever it is, it's just a brilliant way to connect and make connections.
Exactly. And it also reminds me of like the idea of like, this is going to be my last call. If this doesn't work out, I'm done. I don't know if you've ever seen it. There's like a viral cartoon, like a comic strip that has been going around of like someone digging in the mines, and I'll probably see if I can find it and put a picture of it, but it's someone digging and digging, creating this long trail, and then right before they get to the golden nugget, they're like, I'm done, I give up. And it's like, you're that close away. It's only just one more shot.
Exactly. But when you're like digging in the dark, you just never know. I think that's why it's so important to be passionate about what you're doing and telling stories that you're passionate about. Because if you're just telling stories about things that you think people will like or that you think will make you maybe more successful because it does really well on Instagram or YouTube, I don't think you're going to stick at it. Whereas if you're making films about a topic you're really passionate about, then it's going to go so much further.
Like we've talked about, filmmaking is a very tough thing, and there are a lot of obstacles to be able to even just finish a project. And then once you've finished one, it's also sometimes rare to finish one that you like, that you're really proud of. You're like, you know what, this is the representation that I want to put out there. Even if you get those two things right, we're still not in control of how people respond to it, how people react. How have you been able to, over time, separate a project's failure from like your own self-worth failure? Do you know what I mean? Like, if you fail at a project, it's easy for that to feel like, well, that means I'm a failure. That means I'm terrible. How have you able to separate that emotion? Because that, I think, is a trap that a lot of people fall into.
I think it's doing a lot of inner work, and a lot of that is through my being in a relationship, because I think a relationship often is a mirror to who you are. And for so long I was just focused on filmmaking, and relationships came secondary until I met my now wife, and I was like, nope, she's the one, I'm going to make this work. And through that I realized I had a lot of work to do, and together we worked through things, and a lot of it was based on a book by Brené Brown. Rising Strong was the one that had a big, profound impact on me. She uses the words, you're worthy of love and belonging without having to do anything. I think we live in such a hustle culture where we're validated for doing, but we're not human doings, we're human beings. So just be present and be content with where you are now. And it's easy to say, and it's very hard to feel, and it's still something that I'm working on every day. But it's building out other aspects of your life. So it's like building out a relationship, building out friendships, building out all these other aspects. And at the time, just before I met my wife, I was living in London, and that was a time when I was surrounded by the most people I'd ever been surrounded by in my life, because I originally grew up in New Zealand. And it was the loneliest I'd ever been. And I was just purely focusing on work. I was like, I'm here to work. I'm here to make films. I need to be a success. And I had this storyline that if I wasn't successful, I wasn't lovable. And that then meant I was constantly hustling for my worthiness. I was constantly working ridiculous hours. I sometimes wouldn't sleep for 2 nights, and I would just do back-to-back jobs and projects, and I would then do my passion projects in between, because I was like, I need to be a success. For me, success was winning an Oscar, and if I couldn't win an Oscar, I was a failure. And so I was constantly going, and I would also look at other people's IMDb pages and see that I knew, and look at what they were doing, or their Instagram page, and from the outside, it was like they had this film and they were doing this and they were successful. Yeah. And I was in my room editing and felt like a complete failure. And it wasn't until I started to break that down and realize, actually, my self-worth doesn't need to be tied into filmmaking. It can be tied into multiple things. And so relationships, family, filmmaking can be part of that. Hobbies, I really love cycling and climbing. And so having these other outlets and going out, for me, adventure, going out in the mountains and swimming in cold lakes, doing these things that make you more of a holistic person rather than just having this one single-minded focus, which was driven by my lack of worthiness in myself from being bullied when I was young.
Wow, well, thank you for sharing that. That's, and I very much have battled with a lot of that as well. And especially I really resonate when you're talking about like looking at like your friends or people you know on IMDb, seeing what they're doing. I'll also like fall into the trap of like looking at like people that I really admire, like directors that I love or editors that I love, and see like, okay, by what age did they do this project, you know, and try to like map out my success based on that version of success.
I was obsessed with that when I was in my early 20s, and it absolutely broke me. And I had like this obsession that by the age of 24, I needed to have like made a feature film, and I needed to have done this and this and this. And I put so much pressure on myself, and I was miserable. And it's not a way to live. And bringing it back to being able to be reminded of what you do have, and putting energy into other areas of your life that gives you joy, not only makes you a happier person, but actually it makes you a better filmmaker, because you're learning about storytelling through connecting with people, and you're learning about life. And when you're just starting out, if you haven't had a lot of life experience, that is the biggest challenge, is to try and gain that life experience. And so getting out there and doing things that maybe challenge you, whether that's like climbing up a mountain or traveling somewhere or doing a new job that you've never done, that will expose you to new ideas and concepts and just make you a way better filmmaker.
And so you said you met your wife, but now you've also become a father, right? So if you wouldn't mind talking just a little bit about like how has becoming a father shifted how you think about success and failure, if it has?
It's going to sound cliche, but it's literally the best thing to have ever happened to me. And I love my daughter so much. I just like coming home from work and seeing her huge smile on her face when I come home, and she just like runs up over to me and like opens up her arms. She's almost 9 months now, and it is honestly the best thing in the whole world. Just like having her cuddles, and in terms of perspective of how it's shifted my perspective, I would say it's given me a more balanced look on what's important in life. So I would give you an interesting example. So recently I had a client project that was due, and I'd been working on it for about 6 months, and it was due that day. And usually I would work on it till maybe like midnight and like tweak the sound design and make it like on the final day when it's due, and then send it to the client. But that day my wife had asked if I could be back by I think 5 o'clock, so we could have dinner together. And I remember like coming up to that deadline, and I started to feel really anxious and nervous, because I was like, the sound isn't good enough, and this isn't good enough, and I could see all these things that I needed to change that I would usually tweak. And I was like, but I've said I'm going to be back for 5, and I want to see my wife and daughter and spend time with them and have dinner with them that evening. And so I'm going to get it as good as I can make it up to 5 o'clock. So I worked like crazy, and I tweaked it, and it was good enough. And then I sent it to the client. And I remember feeling physically sick, because I was like, I have not done a good enough job. I remember going back and having dinner and just telling my wife like, it's a failure, I'm terrible. And then the next day I got a response from the client, and I was like, it's going to be really bad. And they looked at it and they said, wow, this is a masterpiece.
Wow, no way,
and
that's
for
amazing.
Me, I was like, I've spent the last like 10 years or 15 years making these little tweaks, these like tiny things. And for like, obviously if it's your kind of passion project but for client work, it's good enough, because they don't know the difference. Only your filmmaking friends will know the difference. And so realizing like that was like, wow, that's a bit of a game changer. And so a big rule I kind of now implement is get it to 80%, 80-20 rule. Get it to 80%, good enough, ship it, go. And actually, I think now in kind of the age we live in, it is about efficiency. So rather than spending, if you're making a passion project, for example, another kind of month tweaking it, just get it out there, move on to the next one.
Yeah.
And so that 80-20 rule, that has been like a real game changer for me. And then also seeing my daughter fail, kind of coming back to failure all the time, seeing her trying to walk, seeing her trying to crawl. This amazing moment where she started like crawling up the stairs, and it was just so cool to watch. Wow. And she would be like, but she would keep going, and then I would like be there behind her, and she would like crawl and then fall backwards, and I'll catch her, and then she'd be frustrated, but then I'll put her back on, and seeing that, I was like, wow, that for me is the epitome of what we should be doing as humans and as filmmakers, is to get back up. And it's just so cool to see. And now she's like starting to crawl down the stairs backwards, and now like standing up, and then she'll fall back, but then she'll get back up. And it's just so wonderful to watch and very inspiring.
That's so cool. Yeah, because you never see a child, when they're trying to learn how to walk and they fall. You never go like, oh my God, I fell 5 times today, and all depressed about it. It's like they just fall and they get back up and they keep going, And so that is such a great tangible lesson that we can get from little ones, And congratulations too. That sounds, what a magical journey that sounds like. And the 80-20 rule, that's such a great tip, because like I fall into that all the time of like, oh no, it's not perfect, I need to keep tweaking it. And I'll spend a whole day just sweating over the small stuff, being like, oh, they're definitely going to notice. But then turns out, if I just sent it the day before, they might still think it's great, right? So that's awesome. That's an awesome tip to keep in mind, the 80-20 rule. And then also, so you talked about in your blog post a period where you moved to London for the first time, and you said that's where you met your wife, right? It was London?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, great. So when you moved to London, you had spent all of your savings on like equipment, and then you still didn't have a job. So you kind of had this period of like not knowing how you were going to climb out of this hole, so to speak. Would you mind talking a little bit about what that experience was and how you were able to then make momentum and progress?
Yeah, so I originally came over to the UK when I was 19, and so that would be now 15 years ago. And I came over just for the plan to be here for a couple of months to work on this film that I'd talked to like the first AD, and they'd agreed that I would come on and film behind the scenes. And so I paid for my own ticket to fly over, and I slept in the attic of the set. And it was amazing experience, because I was like there with the director and the filmmakers, and as like a 19-year-old coming fresh from New Zealand, I was like, this is amazing. I've always dreamed of being on like a film set, and I was very happy. And from that, I then was like, oh, I might stay here a bit longer, because I met all these contacts and I started like making my own short films and things. And then I had a finite amount of money, because I'd only planned to be here for a couple of months. And I essentially got to a stage where I had 50p in my bank account, and I had to call up a family member and ask for a little bit of money to pay for rent. And it got very real. And I was like, oh my gosh, what can I do? And what I ended up doing was I did some nannying. I looked after this family, and they had a son, and I taught him how to ride a bike and had a wonderful time. And so I think being able to, especially in those early stages, be adaptable and not just relying on filmmaking, because until you've kind of built out a portfolio and like made a bit of a name for yourself, it can be hard to get work in those early stages. So having that other kind of work, whatever you can do, whether it's working in a supermarket, or for me it was nannying, whatever you can do to make money. But yeah, it was that stage where there was no, like, very little income coming in, and I didn't have any money left, was pretty terrifying. But it does make you very resourceful and constantly want to save and in survival mode. And again, I wish I could share to my younger self all the business tools, all the filmmaking tools, and how to navigate the filmmaking world. Because it's like, I remember when someone said, so what do you charge? And I was like, I don't know, like, how much should I, like, it's just such a hard thing to, like, when you're literally completely fresh, like, you just, no one teaches you these things, because I didn't go to film school, I just got straight in and just hope for the best.
Totally. I think that's why the importance of, at the early stages, having something else that gives you some income can also help you just buy some freedom of mind to just be able to be like, okay, I'm not relying on filmmaking, so anything that I get with filmmaking is just extra cherry on top, right? Whereas if it's your whole thing, it could be easy to be a little bit paralyzed by that, and then all the things that you don't know could be super daunting. Whereas if you have something like mannying or whatever it is to just kind of keep the lights on, you can then in your spare time comfortably do the research to kind of start building up those business skills. But yeah, going from that place where you're like, okay, you had to ask for money, you were doing some nannying to pay the bills, and you didn't quite understand those business tools, you've now then been able to kind of create this, really cool, inspiring business for yourself. What was that trajectory like? And do you remember the moment you're like, okay, I'm doing this?
Yeah, I do actually. So it was when my wife and I were on holiday in France. We were doing a bike packing trip, which is when you have your bike and a whole lot of camping gear and things. And we'd got to the end of that trip and we'd booked an Airbnb. And she's really passionate about cooking and food. And I was suggesting that she sets up a online course where she teaches cooking. And she's like, yeah, sounds cool. I like the idea of that. And the more I kind of thought about that idea, I was like, actually, I think this is something I want to do, not that she wants to do. And so that was the beginning of that sort of process. And even from like the early days of filmmaking, I've had this obsession with building a community, because I remember, I think it was maybe when I was 14 or 15, I had like an MSN group where I created like an online community. And like, for me, it's about bringing people together. It's not just about my journey, it's about lifting other people up. And so that's kind of where it sparked. And I guess I thought maybe this is something I can't do because I'm just focusing on filmmaking, but actually it really complements it, because I'm here in the moment making films, I'm working with clients, I'm making my own projects. And so the information that I'm giving and teaching to the community is like the fresh information. Whereas I guess if you go to like film school, that quite often the lecturers may have never been in the industry, or if they have, it probably was like 10, 20 years ago. And we're in such a rapid changing industry, especially now, and like every night and every day I'm thinking about like, okay, how can we future-proof careers and how can we do this? And so for me, then being able to share that, it makes it so much more about, like, it just feels way better being able to do it for the community rather than just for myself. And it gives me so much joy, and I absolutely love it.
And how did you, once you had the idea that, okay, you're going to do this and you start creating it, was there any like fear about like, okay, how are people then going to know about this thing?
I wish there was that fear, because what happened is when I spent 2 years building out this course and community and everything, and I'd like pursued less work in order to do that. And so kind of that year income went down a lot. And I was like, it's going to be fine. As soon as like the course is out there, everyone's going to love it. And it's like, this is the most amazing thing. And I released it and it was just crickets. Nobody. And I think in the first year, I think I got one sale.
Wow.
Like one person got involved in the community. And I was like, oh, I'm such a failure. And I was like, not again. I'm failing again.
Totally. Yeah.
And it was basically like starting from scratch again. And I didn't know the business side of things. I didn't know how to market. And so it was me for like 4 years failing again and again and again. And it was like, this is like the beginning of when I was making films. why am I doing this to myself? But then slowly over time, it kind of trickled and got more and more and more. And then, yeah, the community is thriving now. And we've got lots of people kind of in the WhatsApp group. But I think the first 2 or 3 years, it was like absolute crickets. Nobody kind of had heard about me, and I got a few sales here and there. And I remember the first day I got a sale, I think it was probably a year after I launched the course, and that was me trying to push it and get it out there. And I was like, yes, someone actually believes in me.
Yeah, exactly.
Again, it's like failure. And if I hadn't been as passionate about it as I am, it wouldn't have succeeded, because like, oh my gosh, I had so much to learn. Again, the business side and the marketing side, it was a very steep learning curve.
And that's just another, and it's been kind of the theme running throughout the podcast, but just another example of why sticking with something is important. Because even though after those 2 years of building it and you release it and it's kind of crickets, it would be easy to be just like, I'm going to pack it in. It was not a good idea. I'm just going to wrap it up and take it down. But you stuck with it. You learned the tools to be able to get it out there, self-market, and now it's just growing and growing, right? And so that's what can happen if you just stay with it. Do you have any kind of final words of wisdom for somebody who might be in a similar position, trying to build something, whether it's a filmmaking career, a course they're trying to do, they're worried about how it might come about, and they might quit? What is it that you would tell them to kind of get them to keep going?
I think it's that big beginning stage, making sure that you've got something that you really are inspired by. And it's thinking about, why do you want to make this project. So rather than being like, I'm going to do this film or I'm going to make this business or whatever it is, it's thinking why. And I think if your why is strong enough, then you will be able to see it through the failures and the hardships. And because creating something, whatever it is, whether it's a business or a film, is really tough, really tough. And there will be times where you doubt yourself, and there'll be times where you're like, this is impossible. But if you believe in it enough and you have a strong enough why, then you'll see it through no matter what.
And so I'm a big fan of actionable takeaways. So if somebody had like one task that they could do today to set themselves on the right foot, would it be fair to say like coming up with your why is probably like the most productive thing they could do today?
100%. And if you already have your why and a really strong why, then I think for me, in order to achieve something which feels big and massive, it's about, as you said, taking actionable steps, but breaking those actionable steps into tiny little increments. Because if you're like, I'm going to make a film, that can seem impossible. But if you're like, today I'm going to write down what I want this film to be about, and then you just focus on that. And then the next day you do the next actionable thing, and then you do the next actionable thing, and making it into these tiny little increments that are really achievable, then all of a sudden in a year or two, you might have a film. And it feels less overwhelming. Whereas if every day you're like, oh, I've got to make a film today, I've got to make a film. that is, really, for me, that's been a fundamental part of the process of doing these things, which seem massive and huge and overwhelming.
Yeah. Well, Sebastian, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. Again, like your article really just helped me in a low point, and it kind of just gave me a mindset shift that I just am carrying with even to this day. So I cannot thank you enough for coming on, being so open and honest, same way your article was. And you're just a tremendous filmmaker. And so is there anything that you would like me to share, put in the description, anything you want to promote right now that we might not have touched on?
Thanks so much. Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting and hearing a bit about your story as well. And in terms of resources and things, if you're a filmmaker and you're just getting started, I have a free training if anyone's interested that they can access, and I'll give you the link to that if you want to put that in the link below. So that's like a free filmmaking training for anyone wanting to make a documentary. And again, if you want to be a part of the Documentary Film Academy community, we'd love to have you. I'm here to help you bring your film to life. And it's been an absolute pleasure, and excited to continue making films.
Thank you so much for listening. All of the B-roll you saw in this episode was generously shared by Sebastian Solberg and was either filmed by him or one of his collaborators. The podcast was edited by me, Maximilian Blanc, and all the music and sound effects are licensed through Epidemic Sound. Huge thanks again to Sebastian for his honesty, time, and trust. If you're curious about the documentary filmmaking process, I highly recommend checking out Sebastian's free training as well as the Documentary Film Academy. Both are linked in the description below. This video is part of a series I'm slowly building, something I've been dreaming up as a creative companion for the moments when you feel stuck, unmotivated, or uncertain. I'll be spotlighting more artists, filmmakers, and creatives here on the channel. Not every week, but when the timing and stories feel right. I already have a few exciting guests in mind. If this episode resonated with you, consider sharing it with someone who might need it too, or leave a comment below. I'd love to hear what stuck with you. Until next time, keep creating, even if it's messy, slow, or scary. You're not alone, and the world needs your voice now more than ever.